Bonjiv, Akorja, Kehi Wilchiv. Hi, everybody. Eimear Burke here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. And this is Fireside Chat number 191, brought to you by the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. And as is customary, I begin with a prayer for peace. Gomara Siacon ar fud na crinne. Gomara Siacon in our jaili agus in our jirha. Gonairi lin lenarcuid garmacha. Gamwich buicus jiv, je chivdaka, spirit chivdaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities. For peace. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. And that we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. And that those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our sowers be beaten into ploughshares, and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the Holy Mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. So you're all very, very welcome, and solstice blessings to you all, be you in the Northern Hemisphere for the winter or the Southern Hemisphere for the summer solstice. So let me see where people are from. Hi, Liz from Wyoming and deepest, darkest Elmer's End. Leslie and Kevin, lovely to see you from Sligo in Ireland. Lovely. Great to see people. Lincoln in the UK. Where are other people from? More people from Wyoming. So it's just so lovely to be here. And this is our last chat until 2026. Can you imagine? LeGraw from Washington State. Very, very welcome. So, blessings. Hi, Carla from Italy. Ciao. So, we are going to Wales. And let me introduce my guest this evening is Moss Matthew. Have I pronounced your name properly, Moss?
I'll take any pronunciation, to be honest. I think it's Matai officially, but since I'm from Germany originally, it's a German surname. Since I've been in the UK, it's been Matthew. So either works.
Okay. So you're not Welsh, you're German, but you've been brought up in Wales?
Welsh German, I think, is what I'd say. I moved over when I was about 9. Went straight into the Welsh education system through the Welsh language. So grew up somewhere between both cultures, which I think is the greatest privilege of my life.
Wow. And it's always interesting around sometimes coming from two cultures. Is your mum, so your dad's German, is your mum Welsh?
My mum is from just over the border in Chester, and we settled into Wales when we moved back over here from Germany. And for the longest time, I thought I didn't have any Welsh ancestry until recently. My mum turned around and went, "Oh yeah, your great-grandmother was first language Welsh." Which I thought was interesting, but it didn't really change much of anything. But it was a nice thing to find out.
Now, are you a Welsh speaker?
I am, yeah.
So, and are you fluent? I mean, I'm not going to test you or anything, but
reasonably so. All my education was through the medium of the Welsh language up until college. So I might have lost some since then.
And what was spoken at home?
At home, it was a mix of German and English.
Okay. So 3 languages. Well done. Well, that's fascinating. So where in Wales, just tell us a little bit about your landscape in Wickham.
So I'm based in Wrexham, which isn't the most exciting of landscapes, but it's becoming more exciting with the interest in the football over in the US for us. And we had the National Eisteddfod this year, which was just glorious.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, and it was phenomenal. Just a glorious celebration of culture.
You just while you're there, for people who may not know, what is the National Eisteddfod in Wales?
So the National Eisteddfod, it's held annually. I believe it swaps between North and South Wales. It's a cultural celebration with competitions in poetry and music and dance, and just a showcase of Welsh culture, held over, I think it's something like 8 days. So it's this huge, just vibrant celebration of the language and the culture, presided over by druids, Welsh cultural druids, of another sort.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we have Christopher Hughes. He was honoured as a bard 2 or 3 years ago,
Yeah.
and he's a member of OBOD, but he's also the head of the Anglesey Druid Order, and he was honoured. Became a bard for his cultural contributions. I think it's beautiful. Okay.
Yeah. And it was lovely. We managed to go up one of the days with Christopher and Mara, which was really lovely.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So, okay, so I interrupted you. So continue. You mentioned the Eisteddfod, then I got across you.
No, it's a lovely thing to talk about. A good thing to interrupt on. To be honest, there's not that much more to say. Wrexham's, I think it's a lovely place. Some people might disagree, and it's become more lovely. And the Welsh language seems to be really growing and thriving there at the moment. But it's got lovely links across the whole of North Wales. So it's lovely to be able to travel across that landscape, visit places like Bala, which is within an hour of us, and Llyntegid there. And be within that landscape is always really lovely.
What's the history of Wrexham? So it's spelled WREX. Is it AM or HAM? So where does that name come from?
It's actually really interesting because I didn't know this, but my partner's from the Welsh Marches, so he does a lot of research around that liminal spot. And one of the hill forts near him is the Wrekin, and the Roman settlement there was Wroxeter. So we kind of figured out through his work that it's likely to have come from that Roman influence, and when they moved through the area, and the area where those Rex names are quite prominent was deep where the Cornovi were based. So there's some kind of crossover and link with them in the area as well. There's a number of Cornovi hill forts, not quite coming into Wrexham, but nearby. So it's quite a historic place. One of my favourite spots within Wrexham is a country park called Erddig. It's like a stately home, been taken over by the National Trust. But within the grounds there, they've got a Motte and Bailey Castle, very old. I think it's from about 800 AD. And all that's really left is the little mound. But the mound sits in a forest, and it's created a perfect natural grove. So right on top of that mound, you look up and it's just trees around and the sky straight above you. So I love to go there to do some of the ooky spooky things sometimes.
That sounds beautiful.
It is, and having that historical connection is also really lovely.
Wow. Do you have a seed group or a grove near you, or are you a member of in your area?
Associated with a few groves round and about. There's one based in Wrexham, which is really lovely. So we go there quite often, and there's a few across North Wales which we attend a few times, but probably most associated with the one here in Wrexham.
Oh, okay.
And
beautiful.
As of last month, also a member of the Anglesey Druid Order.
Oh, well done. So tell me a little bit about your background, because I know you're an author, you're a witch, and you're a poet, and all those kind of things. So just tell us about your family background, your spiritual background. And
yeah, it's quite complicated, but lovely, I guess, in a roundabout way. So I was raised in Germany. My dad is German. Half of my family's over there. My mum's from this area, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
We moved back over here when I was about 9 because her parents needed a little more support. And I was raised way back then in quite a strict religious upbringing, very fundamentalist. So that didn't give me much opportunity to connect with anything. So I was put into Welsh school, learned Welsh, but didn't really have any kind of connection to that. and spiritually it was very much a do as you're told. Here are the things as they've been handed down. Do them and you'll be okay. Don't do them and things will go badly wrong. And I went through life sort of until it was my early 20s, when unfortunately that way of being conflicted quite heavily with my sexuality, being queer, that wasn't tolerated or allowed. And it made me quite unwell. So I managed to leave that. And all of a sudden, this wide world opened up in front of me. And I found that those cultural elements that I'd been raised with, the language, the stories, that are such a part of the education. I mean, the stories of the Mabinogi, I didn't even know what the Mabinogi was, but I knew the stories because they were just part of the education. We acted them out in drama class. They were taught to us in Welsh class. And all of a sudden, these things that had just been handed to me, like landmines waiting to be activated, all kicked in. And I suddenly realized, oh, wow, I am actually Welsh. That means something, that matters to me. So the phrase I've taken to using recently is that I was Welsh in waiting, but it wasn't until the spiritual connection kicked in and I was able to explore that I really connected to my Welshness. So I guess there's a spiritual component to identity as well, which I find really comforting. And then as I started to explore that and found the magic in Welsh culture, I started to discover there was magic everywhere. There was magic beyond that. That was just kind of the home I'd found it in. And through some close friends like Mara and Christopher, I got to explore more deeply that magic and then find the magic in the other things. I'd been raised in the Harz Mountains of Germany, and the highest peak within those mountains is the Brocken, which is the famous home of the Witches' Sabbath. And it was right on my doorstep, and I'd been part of that. I'd seen witches gather there, and, well, not just witches, everyday people celebrating Walpurgisnacht on May's Eve every year. And I thought, why are all these crowds of people here? And suddenly it made sense, and I could connect to that side of things. And everything that had come together to make me who I was suddenly made sense. And of course, naturally, the path of Druidry wasn't far behind that, which weaves all those threads, I think, together so beautifully into a tapestry that allows us to find ourselves within it somehow and celebrates those rich and beautiful parts of our identity, not kind of in a dismissive way or sort of a tolerance, but a celebration. I think that's the key distinguishing factor. There are bits of us we bring to Druidry and we celebrate them. And in other places, it sometimes feels more that they're tolerated. And that to me is something really special.
Yeah, there's a big jump from toleration to celebration. Absolutely. I'm really interested, and we'll come back to this again. How did you manage to get away? So I take it, when you were looking at the witches, don't remember the German, I don't speak German, but celebrating May's Eve. So you're watching this, but you're not part of it. This is alien to you and you're not allowed, I imagine. Mm-hmm. And then when you moved to Wales, how difficult was it for you to get away from that? And I imagine, were your family upset? Were you disowned, or did they move? Maybe they disowned you, tolerated you, or did they celebrate you? Because I think it's a big, big thing to do what you did.
I think they went through all three stages, to be honest. It was terrifying to leave that, because it is something you invest so much of yourself in, and that gives you such a structured way of thinking and being, and to sort of unpick everything you've been told to believe and go through that process of, I guess the biggest and scariest thing was believing I couldn't trust myself, because I had so wholeheartedly believed that my whole judgment was in question.
Yep.
But I worked through it with the kindness and patience of my partner, who was absolutely my rock. And I remember one of the biggest and scariest moments for me on the path into this beautiful celebratory spirituality was going to a witchy alternative shop for the first time to attend a moot that Mara was facilitating. Mm-hmm. And I froze at the door. I couldn't step in because I'd been taught for so long that it's demonic and it'll corrupt you if you step in. And I really had to work to get myself to cross that threshold. And I wasn't comfortable in that space for some months. and it took work. But when I did step into this side of life, there were family members who disowned me, who started to shun me, as that was something they had to do, something that they'd been taught to do. And to be honest, that at one point in my life, I would have done. So I struggled to hold it against them too much. And one of the most beautiful moments in my life, about 2 years after I'd left and started walking this path, my little brother, about 10 years younger than me, suddenly sent me a message. He'd never sort of formally said he was going to shun me. So I thought, oh, great, this is the conversation where he's going to say, sorry, don't want anything to do with you. And in fact, it was quite the opposite. He came round and he said, I want a relationship with you. That's more important to me. And through that process, we actually became closer than we'd been to start off with. And that was a really lovely part of this journey. And so now we've kind of all stepped into this phase of our lives together. And in fact, this time of year is really special because Christmas was never something we celebrated. And now we all come together as a family and do celebrate that. So we're still quite babies at that.
So you mean your parents, you all, like the original family, now celebrate Christmas?
All of our close family.
How did that happen? I mean, I would say you left, but what happened to your parents in order for them to allow themselves to move from whatever that strict fundamentalism into celebrating Christmas?
We were quite lucky. Well, I was quite lucky in that my dad had never formally joined. He was always out of it and on the fringes. And so that meant I had a little bit of a softer landing. I always knew I had one family member who would kind of be there. And my mum has always valued her family over everything. And she was always going to go where her family went, which has been really lovely. And again, I think we've become closer through that process, and unlearning the things that we'd been taught and indoctrinated into together has meant that we get to explore what life can be and find those new meanings for ourselves independently, because we've all followed different paths since then. And I'm one of 4 siblings, and we've all kind of found our own little way out. I've got nieces and nephews now who have never known that way of life, which is quite exciting to be able to show them the world as it is and help them find their own meanings on their journeys as well. So it was a journey and a process, and motivated me to write my first book, because it's something I think a lot of people struggle to come through. And I think we all carry a little of that. There are bits of it that never leave you, and bits that you really have to confront and unpick and leave behind and learn how to leave behind. And so I'm very passionate about helping other people on their journeys as well, because I know how terrifying and lonely that can be, and how fortunate I was to have my family as a soft landing, because many people don't have that.
No, I did the same. And I think it's except mine was Roman Catholic, not so much fundamentalist, but maybe you could argue. But my siblings went with me. My mother didn't. She's fine now. But that was a really painful time. And but I had to answer. I had to do what I needed to do. You pay a price, and I can say it was worth it. And now it's come around. There's that time of you've moved away, you've left. It's a betrayal after all you've had, and you've been so lucky to be, and then you reject it all. And then somehow there's a process that something gets resolved in some way, and I just think that is so lovely. And I'm just interested, you've said some lovely things, around the joy and the privilege of your two cultural identities or your two cultural heritages and how rich that is. And then I'm a Welsh person, Welsh in waiting. What lovely. It just that thing about there it is and waiting to discover it, because it's fascinating that you learned the Mabinogion in primary school, but it was a story. And then as an adult, you have another introduction. I was the same. The nuns taught me about the Druids in school. I never think Druids was a thing. I didn't think I'd ever become one. But I was always fascinated, and then learned the myths, our own mythology, and I was fascinated with that as well. And then to come at it as an adult and to have another look, I think it's just It's so beautiful and so rich. So tell me, what's the name of your first book?
It's got a big, scary name, An Apostate's Guide to Witchcraft.
Do you know what? I was about to write big, scary name. Sorry. So, Apostates.
I can show you what the cover looks like if you want.
An Apostate's Guide to
Witchcraft.
I've got Apostate's Guide to Witchcraft. Okay. Okay, that's into all of the links. So I think Ben Stimson has put in a link. Maybe that's a link to. Are you published by Llewellyn?
Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. So I was just going to say something there. Yeah. So you said you went to that moot. So what was that like? And of course you mentioned Mara. So Mara Starling is she was a Fireside guest last summer, and of course she's a writer and she's a witch, and she spoke at our winter gathering in 2024 about druidry and witchcraft. And so I'm really interested to hear your perspective. Inez says she misses you and nice to meet you. Okay. Oh yeah, and of course there's a question for later from Morgan. I'd be curious to know if both cultures are reflected in your practice, primarily the Welsh side.
Both, very much so. The Welsh in the landscape where I live and the German in the landscape where I'm from, and both have an equal importance to me. These days I find myself connected more with the German side of it, because that's where my heart still feels at home, and the stories, the magic, the workings from that landscape, when I bring them into what I do, I find that deep sense of connection, and I find they work, and they work so beautifully for me. And there's some beautiful things within that I think are often neglected. So one of my favorite things to talk about is that witches in East Germany used to work with spirits they called dragons, and I just find that fascinating, and that's historically documented throughout folklore and the witch trials, and little nuggets like that just bring me such joy and excitement to find and to talk about and to incorporate into what I do. And so I primarily write about the German side of the practice and have built quite a library around that. And then with my friends and my community here being on the landscape of Wales, it tends to be that communal practice is Welsh and the personal practice is German.
And is there anything you'd be happy to share with us about so it's German, not German druidry, it's German witchcraft?
It's a little of both, I'd say. I think I find that distinction difficult because I guess my practice is just what I do and I am both at the same time. So I guess a lot of it is witchcraft in the sense that these were the folk practices people would have done, but they wouldn't have identified that as witchcraft. It would have been a danger to their life to identify that as witchcraft. And so that might be the lens with which I interact with it now, but equally so I think you can approach it from that druidic perspective. Little things like there's a folk magical tool that people would have used called a Drodenmesser, and the Drode in German law is akin to sort of the nightmare spirit. It's this malevolent entity that would sit on your chest and sort of press down, and was again strongly identified with malefic witches. It could enter your room through the keyhole. So this being is really key to German law. And the Drodenmesser takes its name from it, and also the pentagram in German is sometimes called the Drodenfuß, so the Drode's foot, because it's supposed to be the footprint that this being leaves behind. But then the Drodenmesser was seen as a protective charm against this spirit. It was a blade, a pocket knife with 9 stars carved into the tang of the blade, and if it was thrown over one of these beings, would banish them, and it would be used in different sort of ways of preparing herbs and different folk magical contexts. So to me, that's something that you can approach as a witch and use it in that magical sense, or as a druid if you're preparing your incenses and doing these things so intentionally and deliberately. You also have that connection to culture and, again, the magical element of druidry that you can approach that through. So to me, I guess it's that kind of nexus of all of those things coming together. And even if you look at sort of modern traditions of magic and the idea of ceremonial blades, you can even link that back to that historical kind of folk custom. So I enjoy that, the way those things come together.
Oh, that is just beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So what is the premise of your Apostate's Guide to Witchcraft? What are you sharing in that? What is the main message in your book? I'm trying to get people to buy it. So
it's I'm not very good at marketing, because to me it's a step on my path and something I want to share with people, but I find the marketing really but I guess the message of it's encapsulated in the subtitle, Finding Freedom Through Magic, because to me it was a journey of finding my own freedom. So druidry and witchcraft to me are special, because where other areas in life we have so many meanings handed to us, in both druidry and witchcraft, and I guess predominantly druidry, we're not given meanings, we're given the tools to find our own meanings. So at all of these gatherings, of all these celebrations, we're not told what to think, or not even necessarily how to think, but handed the tools to form our own thoughts and our own meanings, and given a community that holds us to do that. And the book for me is a way of expressing that joy and that enchantment. I think it would be easy to sit and become bitter and angry about what I'd been through, but that's not what I'd ever wanted to do. And I've been very deliberate for the book not to be that, to be very forward facing and looking at the joy, the enchantment, the wonder and the magic that this alternative path through life can bring, the freedom that comes with that, and just the celebration of being able to find our own meanings in life. If that makes some kind of sense. It's ambitious, and I hope it gets there.
Well, it's just beautiful. And I mean, just talking about within the order that you're not given meanings, you're not examined. It's not a qualification, but that giving reflections and tools to find your own meaning. And I think that is just beautiful. That is something that I think it might be unique to us, that we do that it's not about a race to pass an exam, to get a qualification, to get a recognition that you are a whatever, but to be able to find your own meanings of what. Just given the rise in fundamentalism everywhere, this is like a little oasis. And I say to people, if you're looking for certainty, you're on the wrong bus.
Well, there's something to be said, isn't there, I think, about the joy of dancing in the mystery. I always think of the Grail quest. The whole point of it is in the searching. If you look at Arthurian legend, as soon as someone finds the Grail, what happens? They drop dead, or they drop from the story. They only are interesting, and we only follow them when they have something to search for. And so if we can find a way to dance in that mystery and make that our meaning, we'll never have a joyless day, I don't think.
That's right. There's something about seeking. So say it's the same within Quakerism, as far as I'm not a Quaker, but my husband went to a Quaker school, that they're seekers, and you're always in the process of seeking. And that is what makes life so fascinating and so rich, because if you've found the answers, then it's time to move on. And we all love mystery. We all love I think that having that hunger and that curiosity in a respectful way for what we don't understand. And then there's some people who just want to find out. And then I go, for others, it's like, no, just like you say, the joy of dancing in the mystery. And Liz Hill says you've a knack for turns of phrase. Yes, you do. But it's not about, I would say, swimming in it, lying in it, resting in it, dancing in it. And the joy of that is, because the thing about mystery, if you engage with it, is there's a part of you that understands it and another part of you that doesn't. And it's that there's a sufficient hook to keep you seeking and not too much that you actually find out or that you stop. And that is a mystery. And I just think that's so magical.
Yeah.
And it makes just life very, very rich.
Definitely. It's the work of a lifetime.
Yeah. Oh. And again, you're talking about that community that holds us in that search. Morgan says, I'm living in a different culture than I grew up in, so it's always interesting to hear how others balance that. Patrick says, thanks for having me. I must be off. Oh, blessing. May the path be bright in the darkness for you in your travels, full of passage. Yeah. That philosophical Phoenix. Now, Ira was my guest some months back, who had left a fundamentalist background too, and her handle is Philosophical Phoenix. So, like the phoenix, she rose up from the ashes and is leading the life she wants to live. The search or the quest or the journey is the point, at least while you're traveling through the realm. I agree. Beautiful way with words. So thank you for that, Moss. Just beautiful. I had something in my head there and I was going to... Do you see a difference between witchcraft and druidry as you practice? I mean, you kind of say one is public and one is personal, but just expand that a little bit.
I think where it gets complicated for me, well, maybe not complicated, but where there's a difference is that my immersion into both practices was through Welsh culture. And in Welsh culture, both are so heavily invested in that bardic tradition that the differences are probably less than they might be within other cultures that don't have that.
Like within Wicca and druidry.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't describe yourself as a Wiccan, would you?
No, I'm not an initiated Wiccan, very much. Okay. My witchcraft is very rooted in Welsh folk practice and German folk practice, sort of woven in the middle of there. So it's less of a formal initiatory tradition and more of a connection with those practices and finding the magic within them. So I guess within that Welsh lens, and Mara did such a beautiful job of capturing that at the Winter Gathering, the differences are less and it's a lot easier to reconcile those. And I feel privileged to have that perspective to then look to sort of German culture, because obviously Germany was really influential in the Druid revival and was a big part of that. And looking to the folk practices, looking to the way they connected with that enchanted current. And I guess the circular thing I'm trying to get to is that, to me, this is all part of one great big enchanted river that we all draw on. And the way we might express that is slightly different. To me, the way I express my witchcraft and druidry might be closer than to some, but ultimately we're all coming to that same enchanted source. And even if someone's practice looks entirely unrecognizable to mine, they're still drawing on something incredible, and that's still just as valid, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you value most about druidry?
Sorry, I think I missed that.
What do you value most about druidry, your druidry?
It's that thing again of just having permission to be in the mystery and to be held by a community that allows for that. I adore the way that druidry looks at the world through enchanted eyes, and it doesn't seek to impose a specific worldview, but tolerates the diversity of existence. There's a lovely talk, again, at a Winter Gathering by Professor Graham Harvey that I found really inspiring, where he talked about, and this is something that's really influenced my work, and shameless plug again, the second book I'm currently working on touches on this as well, but how the world at large seeks to push everything into this one world, this viewpoint that everything must be productive, everything must make money, your time is money. And you can buy into that and you can get caught up in this one world, or you can see the world with different eyes and appreciate the nuance and appreciate the beauty and allow the space for worlds that are different than yours and not have to control them and not have to consume them. And I think druidry creates a space where we can do that with such ease.
Mm-hmm.
We come to these gatherings and we're not trying to make everyone like us, and we're not trying to dismiss other people, but we accept them and their worlds as they are. And I think it may not be unique to Druidry, but Druidry does it so beautifully that it makes my heart sing. And so you can bring that then into things like environmentalism as well. When you start to appreciate the world and all these different worlds within it, then you're so motivated to save those worlds, because the world of the tree and the world of the squirrel and the world of the fox, they may be different than yours, but yours is no more important. And Druidry gives us the eyes to see that.
I think that is beautifully put, giving us the eyes to see how connected we all are. And of course, this is, I suppose, OBOT is organized non-hierarchically, and we recognize the non-hierarchical nature of nature. And yet we tend to look at the modern, well, it's always been, I suppose, men. Maybe the non-animists, so often many see it as hierarchical, and then we're at the top, and then work our way down, and then the bacteria and the viruses, they're on the lower rung. They're not. They're inside us, eating us. We're dependent on them, on their mercy to allow us live or not. I mean, it's really interesting, and yet the hubris of we being at the top. And I loved, that weekend when Graham Harvey was speaking, and Gordon McClellan. We're all ensouled. That lovely notion of ensoulment, I just find it so rich. I keep talking about it every time I'm interviewed or talking, and I've probably said it many times on these chats. So forgive me if you're hearing, oh, she's at it again. That whole notion of we are ensouled beings, inhabited by ensouled beings, and we eat ensouled beings to feed this ensouled being and to feed the ensouled beings within this. And I just, it's so beautiful. And, Christopher at the Winter Gathering, when he was talking about terramation, and I had Chris Cooper Hayes in November, he was also talking about this, is it Terra, that company, they're going to bring in terramation. And for those who don't know, it's but I'm putting this really crudely, but you are taken into these places and your body is in a container with alfalfa and other greens, and it's composted over 60 days. And it started in Seattle, and they have these places, and they're in industrial areas, and you go in and the dead person is taken in, and the family are allowed to sit with them during that 60-day process. I mean, obviously not in the vessel, but that you can still have some kind of celebration or engagement with your loved one who is being composted. And then you get, is it 250, a huge amount of compost. It's much heavier than the person who went into the thingy, isn't that it? And it's just fascinating that then we all contribute to the next things that grow. I mean, it's just beautiful. Now, Sean Clancy says, interesting to think where soul beings fall into the cycles reincarnation. And of course, the animistic worldview is that everything has a soul. And I think it's just so beautiful. But it's not just animate. It's like, well, are rocks not living? Maybe they're, are they animated? The whole notion that everything is animated, even the things that don't look like animated. I find that so reassuring.
Mm-hmm. There's a lovely book that I found really inspiring around that, The Spell of the Sensuous, that speaks about animism, and a bit from it that always stuck with me is how words can be seen as through an animistic context, and to cultures who maybe don't have reading as part of their culture, historic cultures, if you walked in and you had a page talking to you, how animistic is that these words, that there's things that are saying words to you, that are literally just scribbles on a piece of paper. Why should nature not speak in the same way, even though we might not understand it?
I think that's so beautiful. Yeah, because I mean, it's symbolism everywhere. whether it's the letters of an alphabet, and of course we have different alphabets, or a bee passing you by, or a bird calling at a particular time. Owen has a question for you coming up. So, Leighton, catching this. Oh, sorry, where we go. Finding meanings and connections rather than being given them. Question: what does Druidry ask of you, not just offer?
Oh, that's a great question. My first impulse and my first thought is that Druidry gives us an imperative to leave the world a more enchanted place, because all of this meaning making and all of this dancing in the mystery happens when we see an enchanted world. And there's so much in the world that I don't really believe the world is disenchanted, but I believe we're in a place where that enchantment can be more difficult to see, or we can not have the time to give to that because we're kept so busy with this, that, and the other, that being present, being alert to awe and wonder becomes a challenge. So when we stand as druids and we stand in ceremony outside of a leisure centre, for example, and people walk past and they question and they see, and just a little of that enchantment seeps into the world, or when we have conversations amongst ourselves like this and we share that enchantment with each other, we give space to bring that into the world. And it's not a finite resource. I think it's something that really snowballs. And as we bring more of that enchantment, others bring their enchantment, and we create a movement that will have its effects far beyond us, like if we were dropping stones into a pond. So I guess that's the obligation for us, is to intentionally choose to see and to share an enchanted world with each other, as if we were throwing pebbles into a pond and trusting that those ripples will go where they need to be and inspire others to do the same.
That is so beautifully put. Absolutely. And of course we have, what is it, Sylvia says, you have the best guests on your OBOD broadcasts. Thank you. That's you're in there. Beautifully said. Absolutely true. And beautifully put, that language is an animistic miracle. I think, see, I get buzzy by conversations like this, and I love talking about this kind of magic, not the abracadabra spell manipulating kind of magic, but just having, I mean, I think magic happens in a conversation. Just, and then when we're in the landscape around us, and then we're talking, and then we hold ceremony and experience stuff. And again, it's like energy's passing forth all the time. And the more we are aware of it, the more magic is created. And I think the sad thing is, yes, you're right. It's not disenchanted. It's just people don't see it, or people are asleep. I mean, and Baring talks about that in her book on consciousness, is that it's not that people are evil and they're hateful, is that they're asleep. They're not conscious. And coming from some deep trauma or pain, when you look at leaders at the moment, if only they could become a little bit, see the enchantment that they once saw. And maybe, when you think of people's children's experience, how so often, and you used to find people, say, even in the order, people who have certain abilities would have revealed those as children and would have them stifled. Either don't do that because everybody think you're mad, or worse, that's the devil talking, or and that kind of stuff. How difficult that has been. And then, you mentioned earlier about learning to trust yourself. I didn't, because I was, my mother would say, as a good Catholic, greater than you have gone before you and not ask questions, accept. And I would see something and I go, oh no, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. It took me a long time to come out of that and just to really listen to my gut, because when I didn't listen to my gut, I suffered. And just to be able to, I don't care. Everybody else thinks differently to me. I'm not going to say anything, but I'm not going to ignore this feeling that I have that is out of sync with other people, and trusting it. I mean, that's the greatest gift. One of the greatest gifts you can give to yourself is to listen to yourself and trust yourself. Yeah,
absolutely.
Pauline said, love the connections you have to the hearts, mountains, witches and dragons. A magical place to grow up in. as is the land of North Wales too. All magical natural places full of energy. Thank you for sharing your involvement in 2 areas I love too. So both in, obviously, both connections. Everyday miracle of intentional connection. That's lovely. So and it's not hard, but I think a lot of people are frightened. I remember I was 9 when I was in religion class, and it just dawned on me that the God the nun was talking about didn't exist. And I knew it to my very core. And then I panicked. I thought, oh, I'm off to hell now for such a thought. And
Yeah.
I remained an agnostic for a long, long time, but I was never religious. Just never bought it, even as a 6-year-old making my communion. Never. Where other kids were nice and devout, I'm not getting any of this. Sorry,
We need the people who question. I really think so.
Yeah.
And I love what you say about the magic in conversation. It's there's a lovely, in researching the Welsh side and the Bardic tradition, there was a lovely little tidbit I found a little while ago about Awen and how there's a magic in that's woven into Welsh language, and that there's inspiration behind it. There's one of the most ancient poets recorded. We don't have any of his poetry. We don't know if he was a person, but the first of the Welsh poets ever written about was Talhaearn Tad Awen, Talhaearn the father of Awen. And there's a lovely article written that speaks of the idea that when he started to compose his poetry, that was the beginning of the Welsh language and therefore the beginning of inspiration, and this weaving together of language and inspiration that results in Awen. And how the way we choose to use our words and share our words with each other, because when, as I'm sure you're aware, coming out of something like that, sharing your thoughts, sharing your words and your inspiration, it's terrifying and it's not always easily done. But choosing to do that is, I think, what brings that magic and that enchantment. And it's that combination of inspiration and the words we share that inspiration with that lets Awen flow.
It's a really interesting thing. So I don't know if you know, I'm a psychologist, or I'm retired now, but I did a lot. I taught at 3rd level for 27 years, and I taught communication skills, and I'm talking about actual communication skills, not how to use a phone. And talking about body language and how body language is, there was a statistic that 7% of our language is through words and the rest is.
I've just been doing that exact training.
And then I had a colleague who said, no, it's 8%. That is true, and it is not true. Because, sticks and stones made my bones. And Steph says words are limiting. So there are so many mixed messages or contradictions or paradoxes about words, either spoken words or written words. And of course, with a paradox, both sides are true and they're both right. But in the Bible, it says, and first there was the word. I hope that's the beginning, and then there was the word. That is breath. That is sound with breath. How important that is. You shouldn't care what people say to you. They're just words. They mean nothing. The magic and the intention behind the power of healing or the power of malice, whatever that is. And yet the written word is magical too. I'm just always... Like I would say, our Druidic ancestors, there's nothing written because they did not believe in the spoken word or in the written word. It was perhaps a sign of weakness, or your brain would get lazy if you were relying on not keeping everything in here and putting it down on paper or whatever they were doing at vellum at the time. And yet, because somebody recorded those in words, we now have access to them. Mm-hmm. So there is a weakness in not using written word, and there is a strength in not using written word. So it's that both. Like Indigenous cultures who don't have, who aren't literate, actually have a very rich, deep way of engaging with their environment and the landscape around them. And once you learn to read and write, your left brain, obviously both sides, but that kicks in and starts asking very left brain kind of questions, where the nature mind is just there, like dancing in the mystery, swimming in the mystery, lying there, resting without trying to parse this or reduce it down to some reductive chemical formula. And yet I'm not dissing that either. So there's that, and there's balances that we need to leave our wisdom to the next generations in multiple ways so it can survive. And James says, life is itself is a paradox. It is. And it is in that paradox that we discover the beauty of enchantment. Couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think
that's why fundamentalism has no place here, because it can't deal with paradox. It can't deal with ambiguity, and it can't deal with uncertainty. And I think that's one of the strengths we have within OBOD is that, and as a psychologist, psychologists are around helping clients live with uncertainty. There's no guarantee. And yet, in the world in which we live, you're told, are you insured? Your car is to be insured, your house. No. Because this is going to keep you safe, because when the big bad event happens, etc., and that it gives you security. And then we've, 5 years ago had a pandemic that threw all that certainty stuff out the window. And now it's back to learning to live with uncertainty and mystery. And that is where we need to be. What is it? Liz says, others writing of the Druids, the problem is the solution, as we say in permaculture. These writings allowing us to find our way back to what we lost. Lovely, Liz. And then, I think the modern world can't deal with mystery. And yet everybody craves for it. Look at love, for example. Who doesn't want to be loved? There's this thing that, I don't know the percentage of marriages in the US end in divorce, but how many times do people get married over and over again? Because they're still looking for love, maybe looking in the wrong way, or maybe not be healthy love, but whatever it is that we are drawn to. It calls us all the time, maybe to repeat that first bond that we ever had. Maybe in the womb, because once we're born, we don't always have good relationships with our mothers. I don't know. And science can't help us at all. It's not rational, and yet it drives us. And that's a mystery, and that's magic. And it's the same with spirituality, I think.
I think what you're talking about there as well is such a good example of where words limit us. One of my favorite poets, being German, is Rainer Maria Rilke.
Yeah.
And he writes a little in his letters to a young poet on living the mysteries and not just having it as that philosophical exercise, and particularly the example of love. If we read love poetry, what does that mean, and what does it matter if we've not first lived that? And if we haven't had these generations of lovers living out those mysteries so that the words have some kind of meaning. And so I guess that's also, again, that paradox and that infinitely turning wheel that feeds itself of first we must live the mysteries before we can even ever hope to articulate them. And then once we articulate them, we need others to live them, or it'll make no sense.
Absolutely. And of course, it's all about experience. And I know, I think it's early on in the Bardic grade. I don't think I'm given a big thing about the Book of Nature. And that is where you find so much wisdom, magic, mystery in the Book of Nature. And that's not written anywhere. It's out there. And that having that, we're talking about looking at trees, go and be with the tree rather than reading about the tree. Leave the reading till later, but just going out there and spending time. And I remember the first time I really discovered the magic of a fire. And this is before I joined OBOD. I was doing a series of sweat lodges with a medicine woman from the US in Ireland. And the first one was at Imolc. And we had spent the whole weekend sleeping inside, but spending a whole weekend around a fire in the rain. In February, where it's at the beginning of February, where it's cold and miserable, and it's Ireland. And I remember we had done lots of ceremonies, and everybody was going to bed, and I thought, I have to stay by the fire. And this pure magic. And I had to do it in order to experience it, because it's not enough. I mean, I knew it's lovely to have an open fire in your sitting room, things like that. But actually to look and see things in the fire and feel things and hear things, it was just mind-blowing. But again, it's about experiencing that rather than reading about it or learning or being taught how to do it. Just do it, engage. So Steph says, you can sing a song in a strange language and still get across the message without understanding the words. That's really interesting, Steph. I speak Irish, and often I'm speaking Irish in a situation where there's a ritual or something, or even if I'm storytelling. And if I'm storytelling, I will translate it. But sometimes if I'm not in a ceremony, I don't translate it. People say, I don't know what you said, but the hair was standing at the back of my neck. And I remember being at my very first ovate Gorset, and we were beating the bounds. We were opening up the 4 quarters around the site where we were camped. And there was a Welsh woman behind me. So we were asked to speak words to each of the quarters. And she started. I had no idea what she was saying. Oh my God, but I was tingling. And that's a language. I love how it sounds. I don't understand it. Just beautiful. Yeah. Well, Ricky Gellison, I think you know Ricky. Words are limiting, which is why I now communicate in memes.
Makes sense.
And Sylvia says we ride the fulcrum between opposites with words as well. And then Marianne says, I think the mind craves certainty, and yet in nature, the only constant is change. Absolutely. Yeah. So I suppose it's all of that, living and allowing ourselves to live in the magic of that. It's just wonderful to hear you speak in that way. And like coming from Owen's question, which says, what do you do for Druidry? How can you give an example of where Druidry has really helped you, or has like a specific thing that has helped you with or changed you in some way?
That is a really good question. I think for me, really sitting with what Druidry means. And I guess this to me is one of the big differences between Druidry and witchcraft. Witchcraft is something we do, and oftentimes it's for us. It's a way of enacting change, but it can serve community, but often that's not the primary motivation. Whereas Druidry, everything it does is built on that premise of serving community and of bringing peace and making the world in some way a better place. So I think Druidry, when I first found it, really challenged me to think, what am I doing to leave the world a better place and to serve my community and to hold those spaces? Because I think that's something I really missed from fundamentalism. For all of its awful, terrible aspects, there were always people there who always had the door open. And you lose that somewhat in society.
Mm-hmm.
And finding ways of bringing that community into the world again, and finding my group of people who I can just bring into that space, and then widening that, never sitting and being content and going, okay, I've got a few people now, but thinking bigger. Druidry always challenges us to do that, doesn't it? It's not, our prayers for peace, they're not for the people closest to us, they're for the world. And always thinking, how can I make this bigger? How can I bring more people into this community I'm trying to build? I guess that's the way it has really shaped me. And this conversation we've had today, for me, thinking about community, enchantment, what we do for the world and what we leave, none of that would have been possible without Druidry. It really has challenged me in myriad ways.
I think, and being of service is so fundamental to us as an order. And I see it, I don't know what other people do out there, but I know how people serve within the order and how they give of their time, their skills, their commitment, their love, their support, and how rich that is. And I would generally find it hard to ask for help, but I have no problem asking people within the order if they will do something, because it's generally the response is, oh yeah, I want to give something back. Oh yeah, I've gotten so much, I need to give some, I want to, so that it's not like, oh God, do you really need me to do this? It's a demand. It's like, no, people want to give something back. And I just find that, I don't know, is it unique within the order? I don't know. But it is just so lovely to feel that, because there's nothing like being of service and giving meaning to your life. So it's all intertwined. So what do you do for a living then?
At the moment, well, not at the moment, I work in mental health care. So this is also a way where my spirituality sort of feeds into all aspects of my life, because I work in lived experience practice. So through my experiences, I've had problems with my mental health, and I've found my own recovery journey, of which Druidry was a huge part. And now my day job is as a senior peer support worker, being qualified by my lived experience of services to help other people currently accessing services.
Can you unpack that a little bit? Just to,
yeah, of course.
I'm fascinated with this.
It's quite a new field, but it's essentially that idea of an expert by experience. As you go through life and you navigate your own recovery journey, you learn skills that can't be taught by books and knowledge in that traditional sense, but they're skills you can share. Holding presence for someone, giving someone empathy and your undivided attention, helping them access resources that you've had to access, and just having that deep-seated care for someone that comes from having walked in their shoes. So there's been a movement of late to bring that into mental health care. So as part of my recovery journey, I went and did a psychology degree, that stereotypical thing of, I want to figure out the ways that I'm broken. And off the back of that, I started to work in mental health care. And now I work on an inpatient ward, helping people who are in real crisis, and bringing a little of the journey I've been on to that place is something that I take really seriously. It's a real honor, but a real obligation as well. But it's another place where this intersection of spirituality has been profoundly empowering, because finding a way of just giving everyone that respect and allowing them to share their journey exactly as it is, not imposing my meanings on them, whether that meaning be a diagnostic label or interpreting a behavior in a certain way, but just meeting that person as an individual and letting them, if they so choose, share their journey with me and share their story with me, and finding new ways to write that narrative going forward together in a way that serves them and helps them find the recovery they want to find. And oftentimes people want to access things that are on that borderline of spirituality, things like Reiki, things like acupuncture, things that might not fall into that traditional model. And being able to have a space where I go, explore that if you so wish, if that's meaningful to you, facilitating that without judgment, whatever that might be. I think there's a real power in that. And there's a beauty to me in peer support in that, again, it becomes that eternally turning wheel, because you share peers. We all benefit from peer support, no matter what our role in life is. It just so happens that my peer support is in mental health, but we look to our peers always. If we work as nurses are our peers. We look for supervision from them. And as you share peer support and other people navigate their journeys of recovery, they become empowered to pay that forward then to others. And so the people I support today will be the peer support workers of the future. And it becomes that wheel turning, helping people find new ways of learning their own journeys and new ways then of sharing that, just to make the world just a tiny little bit of a better place. And I think I've talked way too much about that already, but I love it. I really do.
Well, I think it shows, Jules, I'm going to put it up and thinking, Moss, what a wonderful way to take the shadows of your life. What a wonderful way to take the shadows of your life, rework them, then bring light into someone else's life. Bless you.
Thank you.
And Morgan says, that sounds like a wonderful job.
It really is.
I've been lucky to benefit from peer support and learn from others' lived experience with my own chronic illness and know how important it is. So how does that look like? I mean, so it's mental health, so people are up out of bed and they're dressed. Do you do one-to-one? Do you do groups? Or
it really varies depending on the setting. So I work within the NHS at the moment, and I've worked in a few different settings with that. I've worked within the community, where it can look like going and meeting someone and helping them to do the things that matter to them and take those steps on their journey, whether that be accessing volunteer work, whether that be looking at those those boring and difficult things in life we have to do, like maybe looking at benefit paperwork when we're really struggling, just being able to support through that from the place of having been there, and being a bit of a bridge to traditional services. So sometimes people can really struggle to share those difficult things and those big feelings with traditional services because they feel that they're just waiting to label them as symptoms or try and apply a diagnosis to that. So to be a person who that can be shared with and then taken back to the teams in a gentle way and handled sensitively, I think that's the most important part of the job for me, is to hold people's voice and to take that into the spaces where it really matters. Because so much in mental health care happens without you being present. And you can become so disempowered and your voice isn't sought. And so to be in a space where I can bring that voice into all of the spaces and to the places where decisions are made is such a great privilege. And so part of that has become as well over time, facilitating feedback collection when people want to share their experiences and alter services. And there's a whole field now of co-production where everything that is done in mental health care has to be co-produced, so that service users and carers are equal stakeholders in that, and their voice has equal importance. Things aren't done to or for, but with people. And so that is ultimately the core of it, is being with people in their distress rather than doing things to people in their distress. It's very wide.
That's brilliant, because it reminds me of open dialogue approach. I
love open dialogue. I'm trained in open dialogue.
Are you? Okay. Because Howard, my late husband, he was a therapist and a psychiatrist. And we met Tom Anderson and Jaco Sakula.
Jaco just published a book. It's brilliant.
Okay. That's a long time ago now. So we met them in London, and then they were over in Ireland, and we were just blown away by this. And of course, with open dialogue, no meeting is ever held without the person being present. They choose who are the people they want to engage with. If it's the postman, the neighbour, the granny, whoever wants to be, patient, for the want of a better word, chooses who's involved, and never nothing is ever decided without the patient being present. Mm-hmm. And how the whole team stays with the family while they're in crisis, and that crisis, because they are so held, dissipates, and the level of recidivism is so much lower. They did a comparative study in Western Lapland with a traditional one in psychiatric service in Sweden, and the Finns had a way better outcome, but they're not doing open dialogue in Sweden. Maybe they are now, but at the time they weren't.
I don't know if this will interest you, but they've just, in January, we're about to get the results. There's been a massive trial in the UK called the Odessi trial, looking at open dialogue through all levels of the NHS.
Oh, wow.
It's been ongoing for several years, and the results are imminent at any moment. And I think that's really going to shake up healthcare. It's become a bit of a joke at work because I preach the gospel of open dialogue constantly. And I open my mouth and someone will say, you can talk about open dialogue again. But I do think it's such a beautiful and powerful way of being with distress, of seeing it not as irrational, and seeing it not as a collection of symptoms leading to a diagnosis, but seeing meaning in someone's experiences of psychoses and allowing them to just talk and be heard and to unpick what's going on and to facilitate those decisions about someone's care with them and their network. Because I think there was something absurd, wasn't there? Like a 70% reduction in hospitalizations when Finland adopted that model.
And the suicide rates went down hugely.
Yeah. Imagine asking someone and their family and friends how they feel about hospitalization, and then the network steps up and goes, well, no, we feel we can hold this right now. And so you don't have to get involved yet, but maybe let's revisit that tomorrow or the day after. Yeah, it makes so much sense, doesn't it? But I'm not going to keep talking because I will be here all night.
Well, Morgan says, lovely to hear the improvements in mental health services. Well overdue, but thank you for all you do, Moss. And you're so blessed to have these forward-thinking manners of caring for people. I commend you all. And Barbara says, you're giving me words such as open dialogue. Thank you. Giving somebody their voice beyond beautiful, so much healing. I mean, I was blown away by open dialogue. I just thought hasn't happened. And I knew there was a colleague, he was going to study it. I don't know how far they got, because our mental health, I mean, I've been in private practice, so I've avoided all that institutionalized mental health care. And then Liz says, question of whether we want to treatment people experiencing mental health crisis is to ease their distress or make the rest of society more comfortable. Now, that is a really interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
I often hear, I don't want to tell my child that her dog has died because I don't want her upset. It's like, no, you don't want to be upset. It's a really interesting one. I was in Morocco in September on a storytelling residency, and underlying the rationale for the residency was looking at the invisible threads between Amazigh culture and Irish culture. And I had a Moroccan storyteller with me for 2 weeks in August, and then I was with him. And we went to what's called a lila, which lila is it means nighttime, but it's that community ritual where you have Ganawa musicians, and there's a trance dance, and then people get, as it was, possessed by jinn. And I'm in this room, we're all sitting around, and there's musicians up at the end, and I'm the only non-Moroccan there. But there are babies, there's toddlers, there's children of all ages. It is a community situation, and nobody's afraid. So you're listening to the music and there's chanting, and then obviously if whatever takes possession of you, you get up and you dance, and you've somebody there holding on to you, minding you, making sure you don't fall or whatever it is. No fear. So people could be yelling, they could be screaming, they could be singing loudly, whatever it is, just what you think looking crazy. And everybody is there holding space for those people, and no fear. And that's what a gift. And that is an old traditional way of a cultural way of healing people.
That's beautiful.
And not sanitizing it. This isn't suitable for children type of thing. Because so often we do this. Children shouldn't see this. Children shouldn't see dead people. I mean, I grew up seeing dead people. I mean, real dead. I was taken to funerals is what I mean. And that's a very Irish thing. Well, it was in the past, certainly. But it's about that, letting the whole community support people in their distress.
Yeah.
And not being frightened.
I read a really brilliant article recently, which to me brings it all together, which basically the key point was that in mental health care generally, we treat people as cases. We see it as a case, and it's like, and we detach ourselves from that. When someone becomes a case, they're distant, and we're analyzing them, and we're looking for a list of symptoms. And the approach, and this is where my line of work falls, is slowly shifting to seeing it as a narrative and seeing people's experiences as one step within the context and the narrative of their lives. And when you see someone's experiences as their narrative, then you don't have that sense of detachment anymore, and you seek to understand, and you want them to communicate to you what they are experiencing, because it's so important to understand this part of that narrative. And that's where storytelling and druidry and mental health care and all of this all comes together so beautifully, because that's what it boils down to. It's the stories we choose to tell and how we choose to tell them. And if we choose to tell the right story in the right way, in the right place, it becomes something of profound healing. And I think there's such a beauty in that.
Oh, thank you. I could talk to you all night. And we're coming to the end of our time, and this has just been fascinating. Absolutely. So thank you so much. And again, I just love that, allowing people to tell their story. And sometimes, and even Eric Byrne used to talk about, writing our scripts. We can rewrite our story. It doesn't have to be the one that we were dealt with when we were born. And I think it's so lovely to have that to work. Again, of course, that whole process is a magical one. So thank you so much, Moss. It's been absolutely, Kim says, what a brilliant conversation. I'm going to allow you say goodbye, good night, good afternoon, because there's people from all times watching this conversation.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you everyone who's come along and been part of this conversation. Goodbye, good night, good afternoon, good morning to everyone wherever you are. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, you don't go. I'll just put you into the green room, and we'll look at the comments just afterwards. So I just want to say goodbye. Well, thank you all so much. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I could have spent much longer talking to him. So I just wish you Banachthi and Greenstad, blessings for the solstice to you all. Whether you're in the southern or the northern hemisphere, whether it's the longest day or the longest night that you're going to celebrate. Many, many blessings for you all at this time. I'm taking a break, so I'm going to be back. It's when am I back? 15th of back on the 15th of January. So in the meantime, be well, and thank you so much for your support and supporting my guests and some wonderful questions and comments. Of course, we didn't get to all of them, unfortunately. So good morning, good afternoon, good night, or if you're watching a recording of this conversation. Until we meet again, Athleen Fiwasha, Jeev Galer, have a good new year, and until then, Slán go fóill.